it do, KTTeeV? This is KT, and I'm coming at you live with another episode of our virtual series. And as you know, we talk to educators, leaders, and parents. And so on this episode, we have educator and travel blogger, Miss Larilyn Calvit, coming to us from Shanghai, China. How you doing today, Miss Calvit?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm okay. Wow, I know there's a lot going. And as I stated in the introduction, you're in China. So thank you for taking some time out to talk to us today about what's going on.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Okay. And so as we get started, can you give us a little bit of background about your teaching experience here in the States?
I taught 10 years in the States, mainly based in Houston, 5 years at Harmony. Did some years in A-Leaf, and also taught in Fort Bend and Stafford ISD. And then I made my way to China.
Made your way to China. And so with such a wealth of experience, what was it that pushed you to say, I want to try something different and go to China in the first place?
I would say probably exactly what you said. I wanted something different. I do enjoy traveling, so I wanted an opportunity that would allow me to have more opportunities to travel. And I also like the idea of kind of immersing myself in a culture and just seeing how people live, their daily life. And this has also brought up an opportunity for me to see how education is done from a different perspective. I have a master's in equity and diversity, so this is definitely tapping into that, being in a different culture and just kind of experiencing their life and how they do their day to day.
I understand totally. And so as you get there, coming up to the first days of school, what was that first culture shock? What just made you realize I'm not in America?
I would say definitely the language barrier is a big culture shock in that sense. Realizing that not only are my kids ESL learners, but like the parents are also ESL learners. So just trying to navigate that. And also I have a co-teacher, which is definitely different for me because I'm used to being the only teacher in a classroom and maybe having some special ed support here and there or some in-class support, but not where I'm actually sharing a classroom. So that was definitely new.
And coming from special ed, I do understand because I did work with paras, and so that relationship, that trust, and like you say, just knowing that you have each other's back is very imperative to a successful relationship.
And I mean, that's truly, I feel like that's the relationship that we built. Like our kids know that both of us are the teacher in the classroom and they respect us both. And I've definitely learned from her. Even though she's teaching Chinese, which is in a completely different language, she's teaching math, like even in Chinese sometimes, like I've definitely learned from her teaching methods.
Okay, so now you came into school, you built a relationship with your co-teacher, the year's going fine, in comes coronavirus. So talk to me about how that situation unfolded in China.
Okay, so we had just come back from our winter break, which is the same as in the States. You get your Christmas and your New Year's, your 2 weeks off. So we had just made our way back and we have 2 weeks left in what they consider their semester because in China, Chinese New Year is their New Year. So that's where the new semester will begin. It's after the Chinese New Year. I work in a local stream, so we were able to have the winter holiday off. We came back, we had our 2 weeks. Of course, during this time, the flu, like just, regular flu is kind of going around. Stories of like some type of virus has kind of broken out in this city. And like and they made it seem like it was only in this meat packing or this meat industry area per se. It almost made it seem like it was a food poisoning. So that's what I assumed. I was like, oh, it just seems like these people had a big bout of food poisoning. Other than that, didn't think anything of it. Started our Chinese New Year, and of course, Chinese New Year allows us Western teachers, international teachers, we're, taking vacations, going to different places. So once again, not really paying much attention to what's really happening. We're not really knowing what's going on or making sense of it. But probably about the second week into our Chinese New Year is when things really started to ramp up, and it became, I started to realize this is more than food. This is not food poisoning. This is actually like a virus, flu type thing, and it's very contagious because it's spreading very fast. So of course, in our Western teacher group chat that we have, everyone's like messaging each other, like, do you guys know what's going on? Like, the numbers are rising. What should we do? What's going on? Like, what do you think is going to happen next? And we get a message from our school saying that they're monitoring the situation. They know it's escalating, but they are expecting us to return to school February 3rd. Being a foreigner, I mean, I don't know too much about. I'm a new foreigner. I don't know much about the Chinese government and how they're running things or how things are going. I just don't know. So for me as an outsider in, I'm a bit nervous. I don't feel comfortable returning back to school. So I had to make the decision to let my principal know that I won't return until things either are contained or there's some type of vaccine for it. Because, I know that they're trying to keep us calm and know that it's going to be okay, but it's still very alarming to see how fast the number of people being infected is growing daily. Then the question is, how is school going to run? Because shortly after they're telling us that we're still going to resume school, the government is saying, no, schools are we're going to push the holiday back for 2 more weeks. Us technically are supposed to start the February 3rd. We've already had our extra 2 weeks when we had Christmas and New Year's. So we had to start our education or our schooling back February 3rd. So with that, they were trying to decide how are we going to do this? What should we do? How can we continue with how can we continue educating the students? The admin took a lot of time trying to figure out how we're going to, I guess, proceed with this virus going on and knowing that we cannot actually physically be on school campuses.
And that's when you all decided to institute the virtual learning plan, correct?
The plan was they wanted to host live classes, but there really wasn't many platforms out there to hold live classes at the capacity that they were looking for. They're looking for holding live classes for the entire class. And a lot of the programs that they were coming across or hitting a wall with were only allowing people to have like 10 people, maybe 12 people. But, in education or, in schools, like we typically don't have 12 kids in a class. That would be nice, but we don't have that. So it's like, what program can we use that's going to allow us to teach our kids, but everyone at one time in a sense? Until they could find that program, we were to create lesson plans and then send the lesson plan, the resources to the parents, and the parents were to teach the students pretty much. Because at this time, it almost felt like the whole country was shut down because the parents weren't at work. The parents were at home with their children. So I'm going to say for maybe about 2.5, almost maybe 3 weeks, that's what we were doing. We were just sending assignments every day to the parents so that they could work with the students on the lesson. I will say that during that time, we definitely got a lot of complaints. It was definitely not easy because, like I stated earlier, these parents are also ESL learners as well. So some of the vocabulary, some of the words were just too difficult for them to kind of explain to their children. Like they understood it, but to explain it to a grade 1 student in a different language was difficult. We did get some complaints from the administration about some of our lessons being a little too difficult for the parents to explain or teach their kid. So we definitely had to kind of rethink that. And when I say rethink, I should say we met about that. We definitely had a lot of virtual meetings because like at this time, I said, none of us were in China. My whole team was not in China. There was a teacher in South Africa. There was one in London, Myanmar. There was one in Taiwan, New Zealand, and Vietnam. So we were spread out. So we had to like virtually meet quite a bit just to kind of figure out how to move forward, how to address some of the complaints, how to, just kind of smooth it out as best as we could. And then our school finally, I guess after many trial and errors, came across a program that was able to tick a lot of the boxes that they were looking for. And so you could host like a live class, and all the students just join in and watch. And you can still kind of communicate with the kids through the live class. But it definitely took some time to get there. And I want to say now that we have the live classes, the parent complaints have definitely eased off. They're definitely a bit more happier because they feel like it's able to, they're hearing it from the teacher, and the students are also having some type of normalcy. You know, they have a set schedule every day.
Oh yeah, that's what we're going through over here. You know, how do you serve the kids? And so that's one thing I want to know. When y'all set up this plan, did you all have to account for kids who didn't have technology, or was it just the expectation of the school?
I guess that's the difference, and that's why I definitely feel for my teacher friends and the education community back in the States. It's especially thinking about back to my experience in the state and teaching in some of the schools I taught at. I taught at a lot of I would say not most, all of them were Title I. So I knew my kids all didn't have technology at home. Like that just wasn't, something that they had access to at home regularly. But here, the environment that I work in, these parents pay tuition for this school. A lot of these parents, I would say not a lot, all of them are pretty well off. So they have the means and the access to the education. To the technology. So we don't have any students that didn't have technology. The only thing is we had students that probably didn't have direct access. So if some of the students went back to their hometown or to their home country, they might not have had that access to their own computer at that moment. But some of them, they figured out a way. I know that there were some students that bought new computers while they were out there. Some people rented computers as a means to just kind of help support that. So for us, I feel like we have it. It's a bit of a different scenario for us because I would say all of our kids, I would say at least 95% of our kids have access to a computer or to what they needed to carry out this virtual learning process.
All right. And so as you got ready to log in, I know that you traveled a few places. So talk to me about the places that you logged in from as you did your virtual learning.
So I would say the very first place I logged in from was Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I had spent my Chinese New Year in Myanmar. Beautiful country, great country. Any and everybody should go. But I decided to leave there because I was worried about the healthcare system in the sense of like if something was to happen, like how would I like get the medical attention I need? Because it's a developing country. So I moved over to Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, and that's kind of where everything kind of kicked off with the virtual learning and just setting up meetings and setting up lessons. Also had to transfer it over to Thailand, was on an island for a while, and definitely had to do the virtual learning there, as well as Bali, Indonesia. So those are the three main places I did virtual learning from.
How was logging in from those places? Did you have to go to certain places? Was internet access available?
So because of this, as a traveler, I tend to stay in hostels. That's like my thing. I like to stay in hostels. What's cheap, I can save money there. But because I knew I needed access to a good internet connection and I needed the privacy to be able to host lessons or, kind of create the lesson plans, I definitely had to be a little more aware of where I stayed. So my search for places to stay went from, traveling for leisure to traveling for work. So that way I knew I was getting more, it was filtering out those places that maybe didn't have a good internet connection. So I definitely had to make sure that I was staying in places that had a good internet connection. I had my own room to where I could get up, have a desk, little area so I could set up and be ready to teach every day.
And what was the communication with the team? So as you're traveling, how are y'all? What was the plan on? We'll meet together. How many times a week did you all plan? Like, what was the communication like?
So my coordinator, which is like my team leader, she's very organized. She kind of put together kind of like a rough draft plan of like what we were supposed to be doing right now as if we were in school. So she had that plan, but then she also from that kind of just separated it by days. So like Mondays, we just introduced the spelling for English. Tuesdays, we get into like a literacy focus. So we kind of had to break it down in that way because we needed to make it a bit more manageable. So she developed a bit of a plan. She sent it to us ahead of time. We had a meeting date set. So our meetings are every Monday around between, I would say maybe between 11:30 and 12:30. So we would meet around, so we had those meetings every Monday, but she would send resources or send whatever's on the agenda pretty much ahead of time. So that way we have an opportunity to look over it so we don't have time to waste during our meeting time because we all teach at different times. She had that plan. We met together and then we just kind of divided up the lessons. It's like who can take these 2 lessons, who can plan this lesson. And so for example, I plan a lesson and I send it the day before to my team. And then my team therefore sends it to the parents the night before as well. So that way, if there's any resources they need to print out or anything they need to make materials they need to make sure they have at least the night before to get it together. Our school's like, don't befriend the parents on this chat. Like you want to keep it very professional. But of course, when this virus kicked off, things kind of definitely that went out the window because another thing we had to take into account was some of our families were in different places. You know, I had students that were in the U.S. I had students that were in Europe. You know, so we kind of they had specific questions that they could not just put in a group chat. So they had to figure out a means to communicate with us. So at first it started off where the parents could just communicate with us at any time almost. That's what it felt like. But once we got the online program going, that changed. So now the hours are 8:30 to 4:30. That they can communicate with us. Now, I do have parents that communicate outside those hours in the sense of like if it's just like a clarifying question, like, oh, the lesson for tomorrow has two papers they need to print out. Do I need to print out both, or is it okay if I only print out one, or do they need to choose?
And during those times, were you intentional about socializing the kids? How did you all kind of meet all up as a group, or did that go on any?
The program that we have has 2 options. You can do a group live, which is a broadcast. And so the only person that's shown is me. So I'm pretty much broadcasting the lesson. The kids tune in and then they can respond by typing. They can definitely communicate with me through typing through the lesson. And then the other option is you could have a class conference call. Half of our teachers do the broadcast, half of them do the conference call, because with the program, for some, one works better than the other. Once we adopted the program, I practiced both methods with the parents beforehand, and I had a lot of trouble with the conference call. But when I started broadcasting, it was just smooth. You know, it just worked flawlessly. So I just stick with the broadcasting. And the students are obviously they're allowed to message me during the lesson, not while I'm speaking, but I definitely set up activities where they're able to respond and message me anytime that they want to give an answer. Or there's an option where I can call them. So I call the student, and they're able to. I can speak to them. I can see them face to face. We can speak. We've had some projects where they've had to be put in groups, so I put them in groups, and they've had to work together that way. And also, like, part of the setting up the broadcasting is it's a whole group, it's a whole class, so they're able to message each other during the class. So that's also been a kind of I guess a bump in the road in this. The kids like to send emojis and stickers and little things like that. So we've definitely had to kind of set some rules on that. Like when Ms. Larilyn is speaking, you're not allowed to send stickers or emojis unless I ask for them. And I do try to like do things that I let them like. We did compound words one day, and I was like, "Can you send me compound words using emojis?" You know, and they got the biggest kick out of that because they were able to actually use emojis during the lesson. You know, so just trying to find ways to have them socialize in some way without us all being together.
Did y'all give grades?
The thing with our school is there's not. I think it's only grade. I teach grade 1, so I think for us we don't. I know we don't give grades. We give kind of like it's like a rubric. Are you beginning? Are you developing? Are you mastering? I'm not familiar with if the upper grades do that. I'm not sure. I think I think that they're on the same scale as we are on, but for their grade level. So right now, we have midterm reports coming up soon, and we're expected to complete those. So I guess once those are done, I could give more information on how that's going. Pretty much for their work though that they turn in, I just kind of give them feedback.
All right, so now all this is going on. You got your plan set up, you meeting with your teams, and you decide to go back to China. So when did you decide, or how long were you there before you decided? And then talk to me about how was that process of getting back into China during this time?
2 months I had been traveling around. What prompted me to come back was, I think, just kind of how the spread of the virus. It went from being only local, like only in China, to being now it's all around the world. It's become a pandemic. So, in what was happening with these increasing number of cases around the world is that all these countries are starting to close their borders. And with that, with the thought of that, I was concerned about A, having trouble getting back into Shanghai, and B, being just kind of stuck there, stuck in whatever country I'm in without the means or the funds to kind of support that.
And so how did it go on your way back? How was getting back into the country?
So that was definitely a story. This is definitely a story to tell. So I booked my flight because traveling to Bali from Shanghai, in general, you have to do a connecting flight anyway. So you won't find direct flights. So I obviously had to go to a different country and then from there go to Shanghai. My options were Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, and Taiwan. There were some other options, but those were like the best options at the moment. Malaysia at this time was their number of cases were starting to rise. So I didn't want to risk going there and then getting to Shanghai having an issue. And then Singapore, I just didn't know enough of what was going on there to make a judgment. And then Bangkok just seemed just kind of too far out of the way. So I was like, well, let me just try Taiwan. So I booked the ticket to Taiwan, get to Taiwan. My next flight, my connecting flight at this moment is telling us that they're not taking anyone that's not a Chinese national. So obviously I'm not a Chinese national. So that means I could not take the flight. So I had to cancel that flight, spend the night at the airport, and try to get a flight the next day. And while all this is going on, all of these countries are changing their policies, their travel restrictions. So it's almost kind of like the wall is kind of closing in. Things are getting really tight, and the window to getting out and getting back is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's almost kind of like if you don't move now, you're going to be stuck. Because once I landed in Taipei, which is in Taiwan, we had just found out that if we left the airport, because my plan was to leave the airport, find a hotel, stay the night, come back the next day. If I would have left the airport, I would have been in automatic quarantine. So they had now moved to where any international flights will have to quarantine immediately if they left the airport. So I had to stay in the airport, and I had to find another flight out of Taiwan into Shanghai by an airline that is going to take non-Chinese nationals. So thankfully, the airline EVA Air or EVA Air. I would recommend them 1,000%, by the way. They were so kind to like get my baggage for me out of baggage claim and just transfer it over to their flight. So I took that flight from Taipei to Shanghai the next day. Once I got to Shanghai, we were on the airplane for a very long time. I was on the airplane for at least 3 hours. They were calling us by groups off the plane. Once I got off the plane, it was probably a group of 30 of us. They sent us to a section of the airport, and that's where we kind of had like an interview of where had you been? What are your symptoms? Are you feeling this way? Did you fill out it's like a health declaration form. How are you feeling? Are you feeling okay? Blah, blah, blah. So filled that all out, and they have a color code system, which is green, yellow, red. Green meaning you're good to go. Yellow meaning you may have come in contact with somebody with the virus or they're just cautious about you. And then red means like you have the virus. So I was given yellow, which at this point in time, I was not happy about because I was so tired, so hungry, and I had not been in China in so long. I was just like, and I had not shown any symptoms. I was just really confused as to why I had yellow. But go through customs and go get my baggage. And then once I left baggage, there was another station where they split us up. If you have green, you can go take a regular taxi or kind of like an Uber service. And then if you had yellow, you had to go to another area, and they split it up by the district that you live in. So I had to go to the district that I lived in. They took my temperature. I had to fill out some forms. And then that's when they said, do you want to quarantine at your apartment or do you want to quarantine in a hotel? So I had to spend some time explaining that I do live here. I do have an apartment. I do want to quarantine at my apartment. So if you quarantine at your apartment, what happens is you have to go take a COVID test to make sure that you're negative in order for you to stay at your apartment. So after I filled out the information, I had to sit and wait for another hour, almost 2 hours, I want to say. They loaded us on a bus. They took us to this facility where they pretty much had it sectioned off by like in groups of 9. And all they had in there was like a cot. And they gave us a bag with bread and water and a blanket. And they said you have to sit and wait. And we'll give you your test and we'll let you know from there. So they gave us, kind of sat around for 2 hours, then told I had to go take my test, took my test, then I had to come back, and then I had to wait 6 to 8 hours for the test results. And once I got the test results negative, they then they were going to take us home and go through the whole quarantine procedures with us. So I finally made it home. And I had like a doctor and like my community helper that's kind of explained the rules of the quarantine. Like I cannot step outside. There will be an alarm on my door. If it's open too much, it will signify them and they will question me. Like they will come and talk to me about it. I can order groceries. Groceries are brought to the door. And I just have to let them know that I have groceries or food coming and they'll make sure they bring it. They'll let me know when I can put my trash outside. And yeah, so that was like the whole kind of like a quick version of the, I don't know how quick, but of how coming back worked. It was pretty intense. Like it was very nerve wracking because they're very serious. Like they're very serious about it. And they, you could ask questions, but they just, really, it's just kind of like you kind of have to do it. Like there's no question about it. Like this is the process, this is the procedure, and I don't blame them because I know that they did a lot of work to contain the situation and try to make sure that they're trying to stop that spread within China. And now their big worry is the spread coming back based on incoming foreigners or just incoming people. Like I'm gonna say, not even foreigners, just anybody that's been traveling or been stuck abroad trying to come back. They're trying to make sure that they don't bring the virus back to China. So they're being very ridiculous in that. And like I said, it wasn't the most fun process at all. I didn't have the best attitude, I will be honest, but I got through it, and I'm on day 6 of my quarantine. Day 6. So 14-day quarantine. I have to take my temperature twice a day, and I have to message them. I have people come by twice a day to make sure that I've taken my temperature and to check it.
And do you think these practices is what leading to them not reporting any new cases locally?
I do think so. I think like even when they were taking us home and driving us around to like the group, everybody to their apartment, I noticed that there were people out and about. Everybody had a mask on. People were, like I said, people were out and about, but it wasn't as many people as I'm used to seeing in Shanghai out and about. And there were still quite a few restaurants and places closed still.
I know that you traveled a lot of places during this trip, and you were alone. So let's say we have a woman who wants to travel as much as you so that she can blog like you do. What would you tell her to get over that fear of traveling alone?
It's always that first step that's always the hardest, but there's such a good feeling you get after you've made the first step. For me, my first solo trip was to Mexico. I went to Puerto Vallarta, and I was terrified, but it's always that first step, because once I stepped off the plane, and I think once I got to my accommodation, it was just like I had this feeling of just like confidence almost. Like, I can't believe I just did that. I flew, and I'm in a country by myself. Like, oh my gosh, like this is it.
All right. And lastly, as we get ready to set up for our virtual learning here in the States, you've been through it. What words of wisdom could you give as our teachers here in the United States set up for virtual learning?
I would say find balance, because I would say that this has been more work than being in the classroom, and you will find yourself days on end just like doing work, and you need the balance. You need to give your eyes a rest from technology and from the screen. You just need to step away and still use this time to, spend time with the people you love, pick up a new hobby, do things that can kind of, that's going to help you get through this, and staying flexible. You got to be flexible, because I feel like we've been doing this definitely for about 7 weeks now, and we still don't know an end date. We still don't have a start date. So we're at week 7, and I mean, we very well could be at week 10 very soon, week 11, week 12. We don't know. So you just kind of have to stay flexible, and because I think the uncertainty definitely has caused anxiety, but you just kind of have to.
All right. And as we wrap it up, can you share your blog information for everybody who wants to come on and follow your travels?
So I'm on Instagram at Struggles on the Go Official, and I'm also on Facebook as Larilyn Elise. And if you get to my Instagram, I do have a link to my website. It's definitely going to be some posts coming soon that you should be able to check out. It's definitely been an adventure, to say the least.
I think that will do it for us today. I want to say again, thank you for coming on and talking to us in the middle of the quarantine.
No problem. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
This is KT for KTTeeV signing out. 100.